I'm Audie, I have autism, and I don't know a lot, but I do read a lot. Let's talk about what I read in May. Okay. I started off the month by finishing Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I know that this is a very popular author with the romance girlies. I'm not a romance girly. I picked this up because I needed a mental and emotional break from reading Chain Gang All-Stars. That book was emotionally devastating and I needed mind mush, silly little supernatural romance. Our main two characters, Misery, the vampire with purple eyes, and Lo, the were, not werewolf, just were, with green blood that makes him look like a 3-day-old bruise whenever he blushes. Misery and Lo get married for political reasons, so they're not like into each other. They get into each other, obviously, because it's a romance. But that doesn't happen for quite a while. I understand why people would have problems with that, but for me, I appreciated the reluctant buildup of desire between our vampire and our wolf. Actually, once they got together, I was a little bored, I gotta be honest. I was also pleasantly surprised by the actual plot of this book. Misery trying to find her long-lost sister and other politicky stuff between the species happens. And yeah, it was goofy, but who cares? Not me. So yeah, fun and silly. I don't know. We move on to Lorna. I knew that I was going to love this little tiny graphic novel going into it, just because I love the artist Benji Nate. I love everything they do. So that's why I bought this without knowing what it was about. You know, the cats and knives and Benji Nate. I'm in. Lorna is just a bunch of little vignettes. We see her writing threatening messages to future employers on her resume. And we see how she finds her best friend while she buries the body of the boy that she had her first bad date with. Haha. It's funny and dark. And cool and great and awesome. And this one I do highly recommend. This was published by Silver Sprocket Press, which is an independent press that I very much enjoy. Check out Benji Nate and Silver Sprocket. Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. I've talked a lot about it all month long, so I'll just try to hit the highlights of some of my thoughts that I haven't quite shared yet. Just for reference, this is a story about a dystopic America where prisoners have to fight for their freedom gladiator style. In a nutshell, that's the elevator pitch for this book. But this is a powerful abolitionist story with the grayest of morally gray characters, seen as all of the main characters in this book have been imprisoned for violent crimes. But as you witness the violence and the torture inflicted upon them by society and the state, you are forced to reckon with the reality of their humanity, because people in this book and in our real world, in our real society, are more than their actions. I truly believe that the writing in this book is masterful because, especially if you are American, you are taught, you are primed to think the worst of people who are imprisoned. But as you spend time with these characters and learn about not only them as people, but also what brought them to this point in their life, you are forced to reflect on why you may have chosen to believe a certain narrative about them before you ever knew the truth. I think this book is the perfect example of why fictional stories are so important, and I would argue essential, because it shows you your own and others' humanity in a new light, and it challenges your systems of belief in an approachable and even entertaining way. I, again, personally think that this is required reading, especially if you're white and especially if you're an American. With all that said, and as a side note, this has the best bisexual and polyamorous representation I've ever read in a book. I was pleasantly surprised by that because it just adds another layer to the complexity of all of these characters' humanity. Look, I will just never be over this book. I can never be over it. This one is gonna stick with me forever, I think would be a fair thing to say. Incredible, one of the best pieces of literature I've ever read, honestly. Okay. For this next one, I need to clear some things up. I need to clear up the gagging. And that book is The Dragon's Bride. This is a breeding kink book. And I have absolutely no beef with that. I'm just not personally drawn to them. And I didn't realize that's what this was. I just saw a lizard man. That's all I needed. What I do have beef with is wasted, underdeveloped characters, unacceptable amounts of typos, and excessive amounts of bodily fluids. Like cannot be contained, overflowing amounts of seed. That is too much for me. That's just a personal thing. But if you enjoy those things, it's a little romp. It's like 184 pages. And you know, it's a fine way to pass an afternoon. Don't let my personal hiccups with the human body influence your consumption of this book. Also, there's a map in this 184 page monster smut book. Like, that's really not necessary. All right. Let's talk about the next one. That is I Hate Fairyland by Skottie Young. This is a bind-up of the first 5 comics in this series. And look, this was a mixed bag for me, personally. It was written by a white man in 2017. So there is a stereotypical depiction of a character that is clearly based on a black man, and that was problematic, and there are also problematic jokes about diabetes, which I'm not here for. It wasn't great, but I also didn't hate everything about it, and the concept of a child making a wish and getting transported to this dream world, then getting stuck there for 30 years and just growing more and more bitter and angry. That was great. The sardonic little fly sidekick dude guy that we got, also funny. Was the other unfortunate elements, even though they were brief, just kinda turned me off from it. So I don't know. I already own the second one, so I will be reading the second one, but it was a mixed bag. Now we will be moving on to the next book in my stack, which I know I've already gone into as well, but I just want to go over a couple of other things. The Dead Guy Next Door by Lucy Score. This was my first Lucy Score book, and if I didn't already buy the second book in this series, it would be my last as well. It is very thunky, but that's besides the point. This book is about our main character, person. I don't even remember her name. Riley Thorne. Riley lives in this building with a bunch of elderly roommates, and one of her roommates across the hall gets murdered, and you know, it's a murder mystery, and she's a psychic, and she strikes up a love connection with the detective who is detecting things about the murder. This book did not need to be this length. This book is 469 pages long. And the romance was lust at first sight, and it had no more depth than that. The man, Nick, his main character trait was being obnoxious, and his second character trait was being immature. He was a bad guy, and she was a good girl. That's all you need to know. Now, the reason why I picked this book up was because I heard our main character lived in a house with a bunch of elderly roommates. I love elderly characters in books, but the elderly characters in this book, they were jokes, and they were not particularly good jokes. They were not treated with respect, nor were the black characters. There was a bit throughout this whole book where one of the elderly women continually sexualized a young black man. I mean, she sexualized everybody, but specifically this young black man, and it was distasteful and uncomfortable. Also, uncool things about using sage for smudging, which you're white, you're all white. Don't do that. Don't, just stop. Anyway, it was drawn out, it was ridiculous, the romance was trash, don't read this. Thankfully, we moved on from that mess to a pleasant surprise. The Forgotten Island by David Sodergren. This was the book equivalent of a B horror movie about a group of dumb young adults traveling around Thailand who end up on a deserted island filled with monsters. And some of those monsters are the men they came with. Sodergren, I am fully convinced, he writes horror for the girlies. I read 2 of his books now, and in both of the books that I've read, he writes deplorably realistic men and then kills them off in the most cathartically satisfying ways. A lot of these men lose their dicks, and it's everything. He also typically writes women as his main characters, which is usually pretty iffy when we're talking about male authors. But from the books I've read, he does it well and with a lot of respect. I will say that in this one, there were some depictions of Thailand and the people there that gave me pause. But the thing is that I am not knowledgeable enough to know if those things were insensitive or not. So I don't know. But besides that, everything else about this book was ridiculous and fun. I mean, cosmic spider monsters and husk people. What's not to love? The ending was also... I'll forever be grateful to this book for introducing me to David Sodergren, because this was worth it. So there was that, and then we have this. Kings of the Wyld by Nicholas Eames. This is a chunky one. I know that I said that my roommate and I read Chain Gang All-Stars in May, and that's true, but it was a carryover from the month before. So this was actually our book pick for the month of May. This book was deeply fine. This is about middle-aged, retired mercenaries who get the band back together for one last adventure. This was a big book of dumb boy humor. And that was sometimes really fun. And sometimes it was pretty irritating, especially when it came at the expense of the women in the story and just any character who was even slightly fat. It also treated disability in a kind of uncomfortable way. That disability was seen as a tragedy, and the people who cared for and loved somebody with a disability were seen as noble. Thankfully, one of the good things about this book was that it did not take itself seriously at all. To me, the vibe of this book is a mix between Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy and A Knight's Tale, if that makes sense. There were some genuinely touching moments in this, but it mostly just consisted of the humor. The adventure story, there was never really any sense of danger, so it lacked that sense of suspense that I think a good epic adventure needs. But you know, there was a gay wizard, so this next book was the book that my partner picked out for me to read this month, which is why it has its own dedicated reading vlog. So I'll try not to spend too much time talking about it, but I do want to talk about it some more. That's Nosy Neighbors by Freya Sampson. This is a contemporary mystery about an old woman and a young woman teaming up to save their dilapidated apartment building. Like, that's the plot, but really what this book is about is human connections and healing from past traumas. Now, Dorothy is one of the main characters. She's the elderly character. She's 77 years old, and she has lived in this building for 30 plus years. Dorothy is, yes, sassy and grumpy and takes no shit from anyone, but she's also vulnerable. We get scenes of her private life within her apartment, and although some are funny and relatable, especially in the beginning, others, as you get to know her further along in the book, are genuinely heartbreaking because we get these raw glimpses of the mundane details of a life lived in isolation. Like, this book goes from being a quirky, fun adventure to being an intimate portrayal of someone living in self-imposed isolation away from community while still craving and reaching out for connection in her own well-meaning but often misguided ways. And so as the story progresses, you see her start to develop connections with these people that she's lived beside for years. You get to watch as she learns that it is possible for her to live outside of the oppression of her grief for the first time in 30 years. Dorothy's story and her past and her pain and where it takes her in her life honestly could be any of our stories. Life's a bitch, if you didn't know. And that's why I really connected with and enjoyed the story so much. Dorothy swallowed. She knew that feeling, the pain of the sudden loss of light. After all, she had lived in darkness for many years. Dorothy had never allowed herself the indulgence of sentimentality before, so why all these strange emotions now? It was most disconcerting. Dorothy had not been eavesdropping, of course. She had simply been on her way to the kitchen to return the dustpan and brush when she passed her door and happened to hear the voices in the lobby. She's me. She's you. She's anybody. There was also some relatable stuff with the younger character Kat, but Dorothy is more interesting, so anyway, I recommend this. I really do. This was good. After that, we have Snapdragon by Kat Leyh. This is a graphic novel, a middle grade graphic novel. It's a story about a young girl who befriends the town witch when she rescues a clutch of baby opossums and needs help caring for them. That's generally the story. This story felt really fresh. Sure, there were a lot of components that I've read before, you know, a weird kid befriends a weird old, they bond over an unusual hobby, secret family history gets discovered, and a poor kid finds their inner strength, you know, all those types of things. The way that they were told in this, it felt like discovering a new favorite coffee order. You know, all the flavors are familiar, but you've never tasted them in that combination or in that way before. And so it's just like it's like a nice new surprise. There's also easy, natural trans representation in this, which was incredible. It's so good. It's so sweet. There's also gay grannies in this. Another recommendation. Alright, well, this was bound to happen. We came off of a great high of 2 good, solid books. And then we get to this one. Elsewhere, a novel by Alexis Schaitkin. I didn't like this book. This is a literary fiction about an isolated town that suffers from an affliction that causes mothers to disappear into the sky without warning. Sounds cool. And at first it was. It's written in a way where this town could be at any point in time. It's so in that way it's like strangely outside of time, which aided with this kind of eerie setting. In the first section of this book, you really do get a feel that this town is strange and these people are kind of weird, and like something, although they kind of seem normal, something just isn't right. And the way that that is accomplished is by the introduction of a stranger to this town. And her presence there really helps build that eerie, unsettling atmosphere. It really made this place feel like an other kind of place, you know, these people were others. So it was very effective in that way to make you as the reader feel separated from this community. There is this strange kind of dissonant tone to the writing, so you feel it feels kind of otherworldly, which was intentional, and I think that was done well. The second section of this book is focused on the young group of girls in this town that you get to know getting married and becoming mothers, and their journey through that process of how their body changes, how their minds change, how their relationships change, how their just life in general changes. And I think it's really interesting and well done, where at first in the first section you are just made to feel, wow, these people are very different. They're not relatable. And in the second section, that's really contrasted. And it depends on your ability to relate to these characters and their experience with motherhood in order to ground you into this world and actually show you, hey, wait, you are just like these people. You can relate to them. I think that juxtaposition was really well done. But I'm not a parent, nor will I ever be. And so that didn't work on me because I can't relate. And this book, I think, relies heavily on your ability as an individual to relate to it in order for it to be effective, which is why I think this book could really hit for other people. But for me, it absolutely did not. Not only did I not connect to the motherhood thing, nor did I appreciate the overarching message of this book, which is that motherhood is the ultimate existence for women. And I say women because this book is very gendered. I just didn't appreciate the messaging that children, no matter what age, children of mothers will push back on the love of the mother in order to test its strength, in order to see what they can get away with. And even if the child says that they hate their mother or they have a problem with their mother, they don't actually really believe that. And once they're done testing that strength and finally inevitably come back to be embraced by their mothers, that love will be there and will never have wavered in its strength or its sincerity. And like, I'm sure that that would be a comforting thought and concept to some people, but I'm not one of those people, and I just don't agree with that message. You know, I just don't fuck with it. And again, for other people, I think this could really hit, but not me. And finally, the last book that I read in May. The Haar by David Sodergren. This book is my favorite book. This book is about an elderly woman who's 84 years old. Her name is Muriel. She lives in a small, like double digits village in Scotland on the coast. And her village is being threatened by an American developer. He's trying to buy up all the land, destroy everybody's houses to build a golf course. And Muriel is absolutely not standing for it. All right? She will not let this happen. And a little sea creature comes from the ocean to help her out. This is a horror book, but also, is this the greatest love story ever told? What do I even say? This book has themes of love and loss and what makes reality real. There's pain, there's emotion. Like, I heard that people cried when they read this, and I didn't cry, but I did get emotional. There are such powerful messages of aging and what that can mean and what that can look like and what that entails. And Muriel deals with suicidal ideation, and seeing that in an older character is very relatable. There's a powerful message of telling the loved ones that you love them before it's too late. It's also gross. There's body horror. This is like if the Blob was sentient and he dissolved people to consume them for energy. It was just, the gore was gory. The representation of This elderly character was phenomenal. There was also a surprise, sweet, and heartwarming gay representation in this, which I didn't see coming, but it was so nice. Like, the end is buck wild. You don't know where the end is going. I didn't. I can't stop thinking about this. I can't stop loving this. Like, this is folk horror also. Just for your information. It's well written. It's compelling. It's gross. It's sweet. It's heartwarming. It's sad. It's emotional. It's hopeful. It's satisfying. Because, again, there are terrible men in this book who get got in great ways. Let me tell you. This book is everything. It was everything to my month. I could not have ended the month on a higher note than The Haar by David Sodergren. I recommend. Anyway, thanks for coming. Thanks for listening. And that's it.